Well, hi there. This is Ron Rogers, and I've had a number of people ask me about how I started my YouTube channel. And in fact, the local Experimental Aircraft Association group, I'm a member of a couple of them, but the local one asked me to do a presentation at their upcoming meeting. So I decided, hey, I'd put the whole thing on YouTube also. So I call this How I Started My YouTube Channel, or The Law of Unintended Consequences, because there were a lot of unintended consequences. Now, the nice thing about YouTube is you can learn to do just about anything on YouTube. And they'll tell you how to start a channel. It's very simple. And once you start it, you get a handle and a URL and all that sort of stuff, and you are up and running. Now, the main reason I started this was because I wanted to leave to my family, the kids and the grandkids, kind of some of my stories, because I thought I had fairly decent stories, and I think most people think I do have fairly decent stories. So I wanted to leave them to my posterity. That was the whole reason I started this whole thing, and I didn't expect it to be much of anything except kind of just a video log of, my background. So when I'm just pushing up daisies or whatever, they can look back on this and say, yeah, that was interesting. And oh, by the way, this is not my family. I thought about putting a family picture up here, but then I realized I've got grandkids and stuff. And, ooh, you never know about social media. The one thing I didn't want to happen is one of the grandkids, has a great career. They do wonderful stuff, and they get in there on the interview, and the guy says, wait a minute, we did a deep search on your online social background, and we found out that you're related to this YouTuber Ron Rogers, and you will never be CEO of this company, so you're out of there. So I didn't want to do that, so that's why I'm keeping their pictures off. Other than there's a few instances there, like my oldest son, he doesn't want to be on YouTube too much, but it's hard to avoid since we have a lot of history together as far as flying. Well, this whole thing started out as I got a GoPro, actually a gift from my wife, because I had mentioned I'd kind of wanted to, record some video in the airplane. So I started recording video, and I started putting it online just about 2 years ago. And I also had a Great Lakes biplane, so I had a little fun putting all this together and editing it and stuff like that. And I knew absolutely nothing about editing, so I was learning a lot and still have a lot to learn. And they have these huge books on it, and it's more stuff than I'll ever be able to figure out. But hey, I'm learning, and I'm getting better equipment and stuff, and I'm thinking about doing some upgrades, and I have done some stuff. If you look at the videos, you see it. But anyway, this kind of started out, and it was relatively actually slow for the first 6 months or so, which didn't surprise me at all, because that was my purpose, is just to leave this video log. So that's what I was doing. So then I started to tell some stories, and one of the first ones I did was talking about losing a canopy on a maintenance test flight, and it separated at 500 knots, which is roughly 580 miles per hour, and that was my first entry into open cockpit flying. Most people, they'll get in a steerman or something, and then that's their entry. Well, I kind of went backwards, and I didn't fly steermans till later. In fact, a friend of mine, I landed at about 200 knots, which is 230 miles per hour, something like that. I don't know, but I had a friend who had an open cockpit biplane, and he let me actually fly it solo. And he said to me first, he said, "Have you ever flown open cockpit before?" And I go, "Well, yes, I have, but never this slow." So now I have my Great Lakes biplane, and I enjoy open flying aircraft at the low speed range. And let me tell you, it's a lot better to fly it around 100 miles per hour than 580. Let me tell you, but I talk about that in the video. So I started telling a bunch of stories. I told military stories. I told about my airline career, 36 years as a United Airlines pilot, and some of the fun issues, because I got furloughed right out of training and then came back looking at the strike, and oh, it was just a bundle of fun. So I started putting these out, and the way YouTube is, if you put something out, people don't necessarily go back in the history and search it. So I talked to some of the YouTube people. YouTube have actually paid to interview me on my thoughts on various things, which I thought was kind of interesting because at my age, hardly I hardly consider myself, a young YouTube creator, but I guess I've had enough success that they wanted to hear my opinion. So one thing we talked about was kind of recycling some of the old ones that I had done a long time ago, and when I had very few subscribers, and I that was a new thing to me, is finding out about subscribers. So I started doing a few of these things, like my first T-37 spin. Now, when I was an instructor in the Air Force, that's how I started out in flying. They said sometime during your Air Force career as a T-37 instructor pilot, you will have a student freeze on this spin, and you have to determine a way to get him off the controls. And, well, okay, that sometime for me was the very first student spin I ever did. My very first student, he froze on the controls, and the guy was fairly athletic, and I'm not that athletic, and I could not get away from him. So I talk about, well, I did finally get it away from him, but, I had my plan. He got 3/4 of the way through the plan before the ultimate method of getting him off the controls, which was basically to get him out of the aircraft. They have this nice little thing called an ejection seat, and that would have been a student removal device. But anyway, I digress. You can watch the video if you want. Then I talked about a few other things. Now, the whole thing about a YouTube channel is you kind of need to focus to a certain degree, and I've gotten involved in rental homes. When United Airlines declared bankruptcy and the lawyers found a way to steal our pension, I decided I've got to maybe have a little more security that, and actually the rental houses and doing real estate, I had my own little real estate company, mostly just for me, but I had a managing broker's license. But the whole thing about doing real estate is that's probably why I can afford to have 2 airplanes now, is because I did fairly well in that. And of course, the airline career didn't hurt either. But this isn't, I have my channel, the people who like aviation, and that's pretty much where it is. And, a few of you've done this sort of thing too, but this wasn't a big seller for me. So I got these, and I put a few out, but they didn't see a whole lot. Now, the funny thing is, okay, it's an aviation channel, but this little thing here made quite a few people saw it. It was one of my more popular things about just the construction of satellites. When I worked for Dr. James Van Allen, the University of Iowa had their own satellites. And they, 144,000 views. That was one of my bigger views on just kind of an off-topic subject. But I talked about that because we had our University of Iowa made our own satellites, and I worked for him operating the Engine 5 satellite at the time, which now they call Hawkeye 5 because I guess they didn't like the name Engine 5 for some various reasons. We're not going to get into that, okay? And then I did another one, and this got 164,000 views about when I was furloughed. Shortly after being hired, I was furloughed. I went to Cessna flight test, Boeing flight test, and I have stories about that. And I was involved. My background's in electrical engineering, and I'd never worked as one, and I wanted to, so I got hired by the electromagnetics and compatibility division at Boeing Military Aircraft Company, and I ended up, because of this little fix, becoming lead engineer in the microwave. Well, they made a group for me, microwave technology group. They kind of subdivided it there, and I was lead engineer in it, and that was fun. Well, one person said, well, why don't you talk about accidents? Because there have been some very significant accidents, and, there's always accidents, and that's something that people, really like to hear about. Some of the big YouTubers, they talk about accidents right now. But the thing about it is, a lot of them, there are some, and I'll show you, one of the good guys on talking about accidents because he works from facts, okay? But a lot of them are just trying to get clicks, and there's this thing called clickbait, which I think is kind of a funny term, but it's you make a dramatic headline that gets people excited, and a lot of times you don't have anything to back it up. But anyway, a lot of people do that, and I think it's a little disingenuous, this type of YouTube channel, because there's an old thing, and I've been through the full ALPA accident investigation course here. I'll show you my little credentials here momentarily, but one thing about accident investigation, the initial theories are almost always wrong. And accidents have multiple causes because we have so much protection features that everything has to break down basically. It's the old Swiss cheese model that I think you've seen. And everything breaks down, and that's when the accident occurs. So to jump in there and start speculating is just not good. Now, like I said, the guy on the left, he does a very good job on it. But there are a lot of people like the guy on the right who are just bat defecation crazy. And they come up with weird things. Some of them always blame pilots or weird, it's alien intervention. And one of the most recent accidents here caused a lot of just really nasty speculation. Now, Juan Brown does a very good job, but he gets a lot of information off of ADS-B data. Okay, and the trouble with ADS-B data is the data rate is very slow. You look at the yellow arrows there. You're not getting a lot of you're not looking at the flight data recorder or other devices that are on the aircraft, and you're not getting good data. And you see the little red arrow there. When the Delta RJ hit, it did not become airborne. So that's a fake news data point. God, I hate to use that term, but anyway, that is that's not a real data point. So you got to be real careful with the data you're using. And like I said, I went through the full accident course with ALPA, and one thing you learn is do not speculate. Speculation is typically always wrong and ends up making you look stupid, and I have a very good example of that. And the other interesting thing was, when I started in the airlines, you didn't consider an accident a hazardous event, but now with all the pathogens that people can carry in their bodies, and accidents have an unfortunate thing about them that they tend to separate people into very small components, and now you have a dangerous place. You have to worry about airborne pathogens and that. So that took special training, and you dress up in all sorts of weird stuff. But anyway, I will talk about accidents, okay? But I will talk about well-documented accidents, and the accidents I like to talk about are the accidents that lead to aviation initiatives, things that promote safety, things that taught us something about aircraft design, things we learned from. And we learned a lot from the DC-10 American Airlines Flight 191. This is Langhorne Bond, one of Illinois', I live in Illinois now, one of Illinois' only claim to fame. He was the FAA administrator, and they found this bolt on the runway. And he comes up there and goes, "This is the bolt. The bolt failed. It's a failure of this bolt. That's what caused the accident." So what they had to do was they were going to take there's the aft wing pylon attached fitting. They were going to have to reinspect all these bolts. And American Airlines had a procedure that was not approved, let's put it that way. They used a forklift to move the engine and pylon together, where McDonnell Douglas recommended that you remove the engine and then you remove the pylon because the whole thing, using that forklift, was causing the stress. And when they grounded the DC-10s, they wanted to be inspected for cracks, and they started to do this, and then they realized that the inspection process itself could be damaging the bolts and leading to the accident. So what it came basically was, it wasn't the bolt that failed, it was the the bolt did fail, but it was the maintenance procedure that caused the bolt to fail. They had an extremely tight tolerance of 1/16 of an inch using this forklift. Now, I have never operated a forklift officially. I've never operated one, but I don't think anybody out there who operates a forklift can say they can operate that thing within 1/16 of an inch tolerance. So it's like, what, say what? And you don't want to get egg on your face, especially with the price of eggs nowadays. You do not want to get egg on your face. So what you have to do is you have to come out and apologize and say you were stupid there. So that's why I decided not to get into accidents. Now, like I said, there are a lot of people do it very well. Jan does it very well, and so that's not my area, so I stay away from that. Although I've had people say, you should comment on that and stuff, and I really prefer not to. But I got a lot of stuff to talk about. Okay, I was out at the Air Force Flight Test Center in the late 70s, and that was a fantastic time. There was just a lot going on. And I'm also a member of the Society of Experimental Test Pilots. All right, so I'm at the annual national banquet, and I'm sitting at one of the round tables there at the awards presentation, and I hear these people behind me talking about flying around the world. And okay, I turned around, and 18 inches behind me was sitting this very nice young lady, Jana Yeager. And so I got a picture taken, and that was kind of cool. That's me all dressed up in my tuxedo there because it's a very formal event. And Dick Rutan took the picture. Did you think that I had a thought that maybe I should have a picture taken with him also? No, I totally was enamored by the lovely young lady, and it totally skipped to my mind on that one. But there's other nice people that I got to know, of course, being out at Edwards and that. And I talk about them also. And this is Bob Gilliland, who flew the first flights of the SR-71. And that actually is an autographed picture from Kelly. Kelly Johnson on the first flight of the SR-71, which of course was a secret. This whole thing was secret for a long time, but Bob gave autographed me a copy of the picture, which was really kind of cool. And while I was out at Edwards, I got to do a lot of fun things. I flew with X-15 astronauts, and we did simulated lifting body approaches. You take an F-104, this is an F-104, you notice that it has very little wing, and you put the gear down, full flaps, full speed brakes, idle power. You do 360 from 30,000 feet. You're coming down into 30-degree angle, 12,000 feet per minute rate of descent. The shuttle comes down at 40 degrees. I'm sorry, 24 degrees. So 30 is steeper than the 24. But it's it gives you a good idea what it looks like to approach in the space shuttle. And I'll tell you, I've seen the pictures of the shuttle approaching from the outside, and it looks nothing like it looked when we were doing these approaches from the inside. It is scary as heck. And I do a video talking about doing those simulated approaches. And of course, the funny thing was, I was involved, still am in the Society of Experimental Test Pilots, and I was a papers judge at one of the national symposiums. And one of the NASA astronauts asked me if I would, be interested in coming and, flying the F-18. And I go, is the Pope Polish? Because I think he might have been at the time, probably not. But anyway, I said, yeah. So I flew here with Gordon Fullerton, who is a two-time shuttle astronaut. He's passed away now. But we flew a test mission on the F-18, and that was just a real kick in the posterior. But because of my work during the furlough in flight test and that, I had this one individual in ALPA who was very insistent that I join this presidential committee. I didn't even realize how cool the presidential committee was, because you reported directly to the president of ALPA. It's not like the normal committee structure. And I had just gotten back from furlough. I'm a second officer on the 727, and they want me to join this national committee, and I'm a little overwhelmed by it. And he asked me a couple times, and finally, okay, I'll join it. Well, so I joined the committee, and I just stayed on long enough that I became the either chairman or director of the committee. That and the Airworthiness and Performance Committees, because they combined them in the Aircraft Development and Evaluation Programs Committee, where I became director of that. But anyway, a lot of different business cards here, and worked for also IFALPA. And the thing is, I started doing flight evaluations because at the time on the committee, we really didn't get to fly much of anything. Airbus was nice enough to let us fly, and I started writing magazine articles. And once you give them free publicity, we had a circulation of about, I think, 60 to 80,000 with the magazine. Once you start getting them free publication, boy, the floodgates opened up, and I was able to get the committee flying a lot of different aircraft, and I'll talk about that in a second. But here's the committee, and the nice thing about it is when you start going around doing neat things like flying aircraft, and I got to see all the nicest restaurants in both Seattle and Toulouse, and I was able, it was a great recruiting tool, because I got some really outstanding people on the committee, and I talk about them in some of the videos. And I did some research. As part of this, I was doing some flight control research and analysis, and I published a paper, and that was kind of funny. It was published in this Side Experimental Test Pilots magazine called Cockpit, and I got a letter one day saying I'd been selected as the outstanding paper of the year, which kind of was a surprise, but it was kind of a neat surprise. And Aviation Week people picked up on it too, and I got a Laurels Award. So that was kind of a cool time back in '99. And there is me and my wife, and David Hartman was the MC for our national symposium, and he was the one who was there involved in presenting the award. So like I said, I started doing these articles, and I did quite a few. I wrote about 30 articles of stuff on aircraft evaluations and also some other aspects of early pilot-induced oscillation issue on the 777 that most people now probably are not even aware of. But when it first came out in 95 or so, I flew it before it was certified. That's a nice thing about it. I got to fly virtually all these aircraft while they were in flight test, pre-certification, and they were able to get a pilot's input, which we changed a few things, which is really kind of cool. But one of the aspects of doing that is they give you little plastic models. You know, well, the T-37 on the end, I bought that. The Air Force doesn't give you models, but the other ones there, nice dusty models. And the thing is, working in ALPA, you get to actually work with a lot of neat people, and many people in ALPA have gone on to do very important things. And you might, that little yellow arrow points to a Robert Sumwald III, and you might say, boy, that name is familiar. Well, yes, it is. We did a lot of ALPA work together, and he did very well for himself, becoming the head of NTSB. And of course, in this process, we got to do cool things like fly the MD-90, and that's me in the center there. That's my, I think, studliest picture of all time. Now, in the process, I became what's known on YouTube, because that's the point of this thing, is about my YouTube channel. I became known on YouTube as a creator. Well, not the creator, and people who know what this is from will know the reference, but no, a creator, but not the creator. Now, there are some people who just put out a ton of stuff. It's absolutely amazing. I'm not one of them. I'm not Mr. Beast. He just, you know, I mean, this guy, you know, it's not my style, but that's why I'm not Mr. Beast. But he has quite a following. But here is kind of my channel dashboard, kind of the home thing, and that's got 18,301. It's 18,620 something, I think now. This is, I took this screenshot just a few days ago. But before this, YouTube, you know, I'm getting more and more subscribers, and you get to a certain point that if you get enough subscribers, they say, hey, do you want to monetize your channel? And I go, what's that? And they said, well, they run ads. And basically, the funny thing about YouTube is you can say, yeah, monetize it, and we'll run ads. And if you don't say monetize it, they're going to run ads anyway. So you might as well get a little input. And I've been using the money. The agreement with the wife is this has to be self-supporting because the airplanes are expensive enough. So this little hobby of mine has to be self-supporting. So the income I make off of these ads and stuff go to buy equipment. I'm looking at buying a better microphone and some better cameras and stuff like that, but I have to pay off some computers, equipment, software equipment, because I have software that I bought to process the video, and amazingly, processing video takes a lot of computational power, and I have a very high-speed little chip here, one of these multi-thing chips, and they're not cheap. So here is the basic channel. I've got, you know, I've got my stories up there, and, you know, some of the stuff that's more, you know, people like. It's got the popular videos in my playlist because I put stuff on commercial aviation, military, civilian, stuff like that. And in the process, okay, this is kind of funny too. I tend to say every once in a while, you may have noticed, but I digress. Okay. Well, I had some people say, hey, you ought to make some shirts that say that. Okay, I thought they were kidding. And they kept saying, no, no, no. You make some shirts that say that, we'll buy them. And they did. So I have this little YouTube thing. People have bought coffee cups, water bottles, and all sorts of stuff. So that's kind of funny and kind of fun. So that's down at the bottom of my channel somewhere. You can, click through that. And then YouTube says, well, how about membership program? And I go, well, what's that? And they invited me to this boot camp where they kind of teach you about it. And I've just about finished that up, so I have memberships available, and it gives you certain various perks that are outlined if you click on the membership tab there. And some of it involves members only videos. And the other interesting thing, okay, I never considered myself an influencer. I'm too old to be an influencer, on social media. But the funny thing is, they've actually paid me to interview me on my feelings about things. And it's kind of an ongoing thing. They say, well, we're thinking about doing this, and actually I had to sign a non-disclosure agreement on some of the stuff they're thinking of doing, so I can't talk about it. But anyway, they would ask me about, what do you think about this? And then, of course, doing the members only thing, and I'm thinking about doing a thing called Hangar Talk, where we kind of have a interactive chat back and forth, and can talk about all sorts of fun things, civilian, military, and commercial flying. And of course, I'm working on getting that set up. I have a friend, Steve, who is helping me very nicely on, he says, hey, you need a better microphone. Well, that microphone is pretty darn expensive. So that's waiting till I get the process through where I paid off some of the equipment, but hopefully it'll be coming. I haven't had too many people complain about the microphone, so I'm crossing my fingers there. And another fun thing about this is, I fly my Great Lakes, I fly my 310, and I'm in the pattern at Lake in the Hills here, flying a few patterns because I have to keep proficient so I don't get too non-proficient. That's why you stay proficient, okay? And one guy says, hey, is that Ron? And I go, yeah. And he says, well, I want to meet you. He's one of my followers. So when I parked the airplane, he came over and met me. Now, one thing I really enjoy about this channel, and this takes a lot of time, let me tell you, I spend at least an hour or more a day, probably closer to 2, just with community comments. And I really enjoy the comments, and I enjoy the interaction. I've got people that they're all over the world, but I consider them friends at this point, and we quite often have kind of an ongoing conversation because they'll comment on the videos, and it's just a lot of fun. And this slide is old here. I've got over 20,000 comments in the last 2 years. But you see there on the chart that first period there, the 6 months where I had very little activity. Yeah, it was kind of quiet, and then it kind of took off. And it's been a little sporadic depending on what I'm talking about there. But I'm almost up to 4 million views, and this slide's a little out of date too. So yeah, it's a lot of typing on my part. Now you may ask, okay, one thing you deal with on social media is haters and trolls, people who are just unhappy, and there's no getting around it. But the nice thing about it is, and I actually do a video on this, it's probably back in the way past history, but I do control my channel, and some people are just downright nasty. Well, it's going to happen. You let it kind of roll off. You can't take it seriously, and I don't take it seriously. I just go, boom, delete. I can delete the comments. And the funny thing is, YouTube will say, hey, we got a comment here, and we need you to review it. And sometimes they'll do a double thing. It says, we got a comment here, but this comment is so nasty. Do you really even want to look at it? And that's even more tempting, but I'll look at it. And mostly I just kind of feel sorry for the people. Now, we had a guest speaker at one of our EAA dinners there. And this young lady had a very nice presentation. And I was talking to her about, do you have a YouTube channel? and she said she started it, but she got so many hateful comments that she stopped, and that's unfortunate. I mean, um, I guess you got to have a little bit of thick skin. And I said, you really, you can control that. You need to just, delete their comments and not let it get to you. And, the percentage of nasty comments is extremely low, but, it's like anything. The negative comments get your attention. I said, you just can't let it affect you. And you just have to go on because they're fun stories. And I got a whole bunch of diverse fun stories about how I almost got into a brawl. Not my starting, a pint and a fight, it's a good night. That's a little statement in London pubs. And this guy was wanting to pick a fight. He said, okay, if you can believe this, he said, I had perfect hair. And he was, I don't know what he was getting at, but I was kind of just there by myself, getting the drinks for everybody. And, they were over at the table, and all of a sudden they could see what was going on, and they all came up and surrounded me. And it was a 777 crew, so I had, I think, close to 10 people that came up, and he kind of backed off, so that was good. And then I've got some stories about, reporters and test pilots. This one was, they came out to test ops when I was out at Edwards, and this reporter was interviewing the test pilots and what is it like to face death on a daily basis, and they explained that, well, it's really not like that. And she comes over to me and says, as a test pilot, what is it like to face death on a daily basis? And I said, well, ma'am, I'm only a chase pilot. I only face serious injury on a daily basis. And that kind of broke the place up, but she didn't quite get the joke. And then I talk a lot about my, the career advancements and this very interesting probationary flight oral that three of us was in. And also amusing stories about flying incognito and explaining technical stuff to people. And are you a pilot? No, I stayed at Holiday Inn Express. That's an old commercial if you're old enough to remember that. And then I had people ask about, well, tell me about the when you were in pilot training about the wives and girlfriends and that. And the funny thing is, nowadays people wait a long time to get married. We were people in our 20s, and we were, the vast majority of us were married. And then I like to talk about various aspects of how the whole profession, the career, the equipment advanced, and what were some of the thoughts in the olden times. Because having a biplane, it's really interesting how aviation developed, because there's a lot of stuff that most people don't really realize. Non-harmonization of flight controls. Sometimes the stick did one thing. Sometimes you had two sticks, one for elevator, one for rudder. It was just lack of standardization. And on this one I talk about, they felt that seat belts in aircraft, you're sitting in a wicker chair in this open cockpit, and they thought seatbelts were dangerous. And the reason they felt seatbelts were dangerous was kind of interesting in itself. And then, of course, I talk about my time out at Edwards and fun aspects of, any of you familiar with that, you might know about Cords Road, which is our test area, and we flew very low over that, simulating penetrating aircraft. And then actually another fun thing about this is I've been asked by a number of different organizations and people to give presentations, and I did one down to Lewis University, which was kind of cool. And then again, various just stories I talk about, things that went on. And of course, I was involved in flight test, and I flew the 777, involved in a number of flight test missions before it was certified. And like I said, the nice thing on the committee is I got to fly a lot of flight evaluations on various aircraft. And at this point in time, I've almost published all of them. I've got like 4 more to go that I'm putting together the presentation on. Oh, and the funny thing is, I like to talk about accidents that I said that, bring aviation issues to the forefront, things we learn from. And this has to do, I have been critical of the Airbus design. I mean, it's a great airplane. I love flying it. I was a line check airman on it. I flew it for 8 years and really enjoyed it, and enjoyed all the flight tests of their airplanes. But there are certain issues in the flight control system, And I've done a couple presentations on it. The second one actually involves Tom Tilden, who was an SR-71 test pilot that I knew out at Edwards, and he went into a very deep dive on this. And it's a very interesting little video for you to look at if you're interested. And then just about various other type of interesting flight test tales, if you will. And of course, got to fly all sorts of things. The Dornier 328 flight evaluation. Test pilot stories. I was a young chase pilot, and I got caught between the ops officer and the test pilot on the B-1 not doing, they both had something they wanted me to do, and I couldn't do it both, and I tried to do both, and I got in trouble with both. So that's kind of the story there. And then I had a guy, this is kind of interesting because when I was an instructor, this was after I was a instructor out at Vance Air Force Base about 74 or so. Okay, the Vietnam War has ended. We got a flood of people coming back. We've got the energy crisis where gas, okay, now it's up to 70 cents a gallon. Yes. And as my dad said, when it reaches $1 a gallon, everybody will be happy. The oil companies will be happy, and that'll be the end of it. Well, not quite. But they slowed down pilot training, and I had talked about it from the instructor side because you kind of like, instead of having 3 students, you'd have 1 student. So you didn't want to wash out your 1 student or you weren't flying. Okay, well, then I had somebody tell me about it from kind of the other side of it. They were one of the students waiting to get in to go to pilot training, and some of their stories are really heart-wrenching. And then people said, well, what's it like to fly the DC-10? Well, the DC-10 was a beautifully flying aircraft, and I'm going to talk about its accident history because that's an unfortunate thing about the DC-10 is it does not have a good accident history. But flying it is fun. Now, interesting about this photo, this is photoshopped. No, this really didn't happen. But it's kind of funny because by posting, this is just on the internet. This picture's on the internet. It didn't have any, where did this come from sort of identifying information. But it was, everything's on the internet. It's got to be true. It's on the internet. So I actually used this, and the person who actually photoshopped this contacted me by email. So we had a fun little discussion. And then, of course, there's aspects of flying for the airlines, although the XP-49 here, but talking about flying with the airlines. And somebody wanted me to talk about go-arounds. Now, as in training, you do go-arounds or missed approaches more often. You do these all the time. In the airline career, it's a very uncommon event, and because of the situation where often you're at the end of the flight, you're lightweight, and the CAN procedure is full thrust because you want to comply with all the second stage climb and on gradient requirements. So use high power to make sure you do, and it can be a very startling event for passengers. And then again, some flight test things were kind of interesting where we're doing a flight test of JP-8 at the time, which was the new fuel for the military, those military people familiar with that. And this was kind of interesting because during the test, this airplane became engulfed in a fireball, which looked interesting from my position as a chase aircraft and from the inside. And then this also happened out at Edwards with the Thunderbirds. They were flying the T-38. Now, I got stories about T-38 because I became a instructor on it out there when I was at Edwards, and I became the T-38 Senior Flight Evaluator, Wing Stand-Eval out at Edwards. And there was an accident where a Thunderbird, if you watch the video, this guy is truly one of the luckiest pilots alive to get out of this situation. And then, of course, there were some other interesting things where, I gave check rides, and I usually gave check rides, minimum the guy was a test pilot, and there were astronauts and stuff. And this is a little story about the new vice commandant coming in and not having a very good check ride, and kind of the things that developed from that. It's an interesting story. I think you'd like it if you look at it. And then, of course, I've got my various aviation things like flying my Great Lakes biplane from 3 Charlie Kilo, Lake in the Hills Airport, down to Schaumburg, which has Pilot Pete's. And this is a really cool restaurant down there. Just those little videos about that flying. A lot of people like flying along. And at one time I kind of shortened these, and I had a couple people comment, says, don't shorten it, show us the whole thing. So, okay, sometimes it's a little boring, straight and level, but or flying. You can always fast forward. But if you want to watch the whole thing, it's kind of fun. And there, when I became an airline pilot, like I said, I got hired. I got furloughed out of the training center. I came back. We came to the strike. So it was not a good first part of an airline career. And I talk about that. And the other thing is, of course, being involved in an old airplane. I have a Great Lakes biplane, certified in 1929, no artificial stall warning, and this is before a lot of regulations were developed. So it is a basic aircraft, and it is fun to fly. And of course, you meet a lot of neat people, and anybody who's knows about Stearman knows about the Daisies. I mean, he is in the Hall of Fame for an air show individual. He's done 40 years of air shows, and he talks about Stearman biplanes because he is an absolute expert on it. Tom, an airline pilot who I also know, has been head of the Stearman Group for in the past, but there's a lot of great knowledge around. And then I talk about my time as a T-37 instructor, and one of my check rides, and from a guy who was not really a very competent evaluator, let's put it that way. And he asked me an extremely stupid question about a wingman following me through, and I basically said if he's that stupid, he deserves to die. And it didn't go over well with the examiner, but a few other people in the room broke up laughing. So it's a little fun tale. And I go on things like even my annual, when I had the annual on my 310, because we had some issues with vacuum pumps that finally I think have been resolved. I'm crossing my fingers because they would tend to fail fairly rapidly, but I think we got that squared away. And then, of course, with the my Great Lakes flying aerobatics at the Cal Box, we have International Aerobatic Club number 1. Okay, and I'm a member of that, and we have a little aerobatic box down at the airport, so that was kind of fun. And then again, little interesting tales like if you flew the T-38 as a student, you really don't get to see the capabilities of this aircraft, because we did a lot of things in it in flight tests that really pushed its limits. And one of those things is, if you go supersonic, you can actually blow the nozzles open and lose thrust. Most people don't experience that because they don't fly supersonic low altitude where the mass flow is high enough that they do it. But I got to do neat things like burner climbs right on takeoff from the deck. And then I talk about some of my experiences as a line check airman, and this got, 166,000 views. And the one thing about it is, okay, I've got a good technical background, good engineering background, more or less. I can't spell to save my life. And my wife, she takes care of that, but I forgot to run this one by her. And you know how many comments? Okay, this has 298,000 views. And how many people commented, it's not Blue Angle, it's Blue Angel. It's Blue Angle, not Blue Angel. Okay. Yeah, I took quite a bit of grief over that. But that's an interesting story where I witnessed a Blue Angel land gear up when I was just starting my aviation career. And it's kind of a good video. I think you might like it if you can get by the angle thing there. And, I married a nurse, an RN. Engineers are people who can't really take care of themselves, and nurses take care of people who can't take care of themselves. So it's a perfect marriage. It's been going on so far for 53 years. She hasn't killed me yet. And then, of course, I talk about, my work with the B-52 radar, and that I repost this again. Now, I'm not worried really at this point about offending anybody. Okay, I'm retired. I'm out of the Air Force. I don't have to worry about the Air Force saying anything to me, because all this is past history. As long as they don't talk about anything classified, and probably the stuff I did is unclassified by now, but they never call you up and say, hey, it's unclassified. So anyway, they're not going to bring me back in the Air Force to let me fly airplanes and punish me. In fact, but after you saw Independence Day, I said to a general that I know, we were actually out at the bar in where were we at? We were in Frankfurt at the bar after imbibing a few of the local brews. And I said, is there any chance I could come back and fly as a Air Force pilot? I said, I'd seen Independence Day. And he says, well, I'll tell you what, Ron, if the aliens invade, give me a call. And of course, I got old and decrepit at 65. It used to be 60, but now they upped it to 65, or that 5-year period, what my son calls the great career pause. And then I got to the point where 65, and my co-pilots are saying, hey, we love flying with you. Get out of my seat. So I retired. So, United Airlines has a policy about putting things on social media, but hey, doesn't apply to me. Now, I'm not going to say anything terribly embarrassing by the company and stuff like that, but I'm retired, so my chief pilot isn't going to call me in because he's probably retired by now too. So, but anyway, I don't go into anything terribly nasty that they're going to be offended by, but I don't have to worry about simple YouTube stuff and getting into trouble. So what do I got? I've got my toys here, and that's my toy box there, the hanger, and that little sign there on the door says Corvette parking only. All others would be crushed, but I've got my 2 toys for now. As long as I can fly the 310, that's a lot of button pushing on that thing. It's got a very nice avionics suite that I talk about in the videos. But, if the insurance doesn't kill me, or I don't get to the point where, I take typically 1 to 2 check rides a year. And I think I'll know when I'm ready to stop, or, if nothing else, people will tell me when I'm ready to stop. And one thing that I do now is I videotape every single one of my flights, and I review it. I also publish them so you guys can watch, because I think they're fun, flying patterns. The quality of the video is just beautiful. But I've got my toys now, but, I look at the videos and I review them. And not only if I see something that says, hey man, you're losing it, or if, you guys watching it on YouTube say, man, this guy's really losing it, then that's going to be an indication. But I think I'm mature enough to know when I'm done. And I'll get rid of the 310 before I get rid of the Great Lakes. That's the plan. And the Great Lakes, okay, it's conventional gear aircraft. It's the difference between pulling a wagon and pushing a wagon as far as it handles. And you have to, as they say, fly it to the hangar. Well, when I start having trouble with my tail dragger, I'll know it's time to give up. But right now, I still enjoy flying aerobatics in it. And now that it's getting warmer, that's coming back. And of course, there's my channel. So if you like it, look at my videos, subscribe, become a member, all the good stuff you want to do. Buy a t-shirt if you want. What the heck? Anyway, that's the story of my YouTube channel and how it came from just leaving something for the kids to people actually liking it, wanting to buy swag, wanting to be members, and a lot of people following it. And, I've comment that, a guy says, I always enjoy getting the daily, because I'm putting out 1 video a day. Says, I always enjoy watching your videos over my coffee. So stuff like that is really a lot of fun. So that's the story of the development of my YouTube channel. If you stayed this far, I hope you found it interesting, enjoyable, and hey, thanks for watching.